When people say good things about you, it actually helps your brain to focus on, the positive aspect. You get that dopamine boost, and it's like a reward type of reaction. When people say negative things about you, it actually then affects you in a very negative way. So what happens is it can actually start to increase your anxiety as well. You will pay attention. Sometimes it can be positive if it's the type of criticism that will help you to avoid antisocial type behavior. It's like we create our social norms that way. But it can also increase some type of anxiety, which can make it really hard for some people to focus on school, on work, on self-improvement. It just sort of shuts them down. So that's a little bit about the brain function related to criticism and gossip, and we want to sort of know what happens and why. It's a survival thing. So it's associated with social cognition and executive control in the brain. So you get that increase in dopamine, decrease in antisocial behavior, so it can have its benefits. But you want to pay attention because obviously we're in a different time now. We still need tribes. Tribes are highly important, but there's a light side and a dark side to tribes. So you have tribes you want to be connected to, but we're not in the same situation we were 10,000 years ago. Now we get to choose our tribes. So we want to know whether we're using our primitive thinking or our higher thinking, right? Because we're very different now than we were 10,000 years ago, except we tend to react really quickly. So if someone's talking about you or you're talking to someone else, you want to stop and ask yourself, is this sort of primitive thinking, reaction type behavior, or am I reaching my higher self? Am I using my higher level thinking in this situation? Is this good for me? Is it good for someone else? Is it making anyone better in any way? So, and I'll tell you sort of a couple situations, that might be useful to you. To give you an example, I was actually really blessed and fortunate enough to have dinner one time with Byron Katie. And it was before I married my husband. We've been together a long time now. And I was saying that there was no possible way I would ever be married to like a politician or anyone who was in the public eye. Never wanted to be with somebody who was famous because I didn't want criticism in my life. Wanted to be like sort of, low key and anonymous. And sure enough, right before we got married, my husband's PBS shows like took off. His popularity went up along with a lot of criticism. And so it made me really anxious at first. And we weren't married yet. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to get rid of him because he's like well known now. And then all of a sudden he tries to drag me into the act. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know about this. So I was having dinner with Byron Katie one night and she said, so tell me. She said, I said I don't want to be in the limelight. It makes me really uncomfortable. I don't like the criticism. And she said, so what does it mean if people criticize you? And she said, because I said, it would make me really uncomfortable if people start saying negative things and they're always looking at us. And she said, they will. So that was the first part. She said, just know they're going to. And there was something about when she said that was such a relief. I'm like, oh, you're right. They're going to. It's just like, just accept it. Accept that they're going to. But the next part was so helpful because she said, and what does that mean? What does it mean if they do? What does it mean to you? Because that's the part where you really have to ask yourself, why does it bother me? And that was so really, completely helpful. So I just thought I would share that with you. And then just know that gossip and criticism are very similar. Criticism is when you're saying it to someone else. Gossip is when you're talking about someone to another person. But they have sort of the same effect. But believe it or not, gossip actually changes your visual perception of another person. Believe it or not. If someone says something positive about someone, you see them one way. If they say something negative about someone, it actually changes how you visually see that person, and we're hardwired to actually pay closer attention to things we perceive as dangerous. So if they use key words that are trigger words for you that you perceive as dangerous or distasteful, you're going to pay really close attention and you'll visually perceive them differently. Just know that, because it might just be someone else's opinion and have nothing to do with reality. So what can you do about it? Right? Because we're not getting away without criticism. If you think that you are better than that, ask again. Ask yourself again, because we all do it. So ask yourself these questions, because it's really helpful, I think, when you do this. I actually made a post about criticism, and someone private messaged me and asked me on my personal Facebook page, asked me if I would dig into this a little more because, what do you do with kids and how do you work through this yourself? Because adults are not immune to peer pressure. So these are some questions that I like to run people through. Depending on who's doing the criticizing and the gossip, what's your goal for the relationship? So my husband and I talk about ants all the time, automatic negative thoughts. So when someone's talking negatively about you and you get these automatic negative thoughts about it, you want to ask yourself, okay, hold on, don't just react. What's the goal for the relationship? If there's no relationship, it makes it a lot easier to make your decision. But if you have a goal for the relationship, you need to think about how you're going to respond. Does it really matter? And then this is what I always tell my daughter. So I always tell her when she's, dealing with this at school, it's like, just remember one thing. There's 2 ways to have the tallest building in town. You either build the tallest building or you tear someone else's down. So much easier to tear someone else's down than to do the work to build the tallest building in town. So that's one thing and just ask yourself, is that person, do they have a reason they need to tear my building down? Is it just too hard for them to build their own building? What is it that's going on right now? And then ask yourself, is what they're saying true? Maybe this is one of those cases where it's a social norm situation. Maybe it's helpful for you to listen to it and not take it so personally. Maybe it's a good idea to just not react and go, would this be helpful for me to at least hear? Sometimes we don't want to hear the truth, but the truth will set you free, right? And if it's not something you care about or you agree with, then move to the next step. What does it mean? Maybe you don't care. What does it mean? So what? If you don't like what they're saying, it's like, all right, thank you for your opinion. Moving on. Okay? You don't have to agree with what everybody says. And then here's the big one. Should you walk away? Some people are clearly toxic. So some tribes, there's a light side and a dark side to every tribe, and some tribes are toxic. Some people are toxic. Sometimes it's best to love people from a distance. And you just have to know when that's true or not. Should you love someone from a distance, or is it someone you can't do that with? Is it someone really close to you, like a child, or someone in your family that you can't just walk away from, or your mom, or someone you don't want to do that with? And you have to find a way to work through that. And so just know that hurt people. And just because you don't want to end the relationship always, so if you can walk away, walk away. And if not, then just try to remind yourself, hurt people. There's usually a reason people are saying or doing what they're doing. It's either their values disagree with your values, or maybe they've been hurt and they just don't know how to handle the situation. And I love this quote. This is always so helpful. There is one who speaks like the piercings of a sword, but the tongue of the wise promote health. Right? So very ancient writing. And even back then they were talking about how negativity is bad for you, but when you speak kindly and wisely, it promotes health.